What is up, people of the internet? Uh-oh, what's going on? I hear some noise in the background. What's going on here? Where's that coming from? Oh, that's weird. Hi, everybody. It's Chase. Welcome to another episode of the show. You guys are familiar with the show. This is the Chase Jarvis Live Show here on Creative Live. I am very, very excited to share my guest with you today. Before we do, just a little check-in here. I know we've got people coming in from all over the world. We're broadcasting on the new Creative Live TV channel. That's creativelive.com/TV, where we're bringing live community performances and talks and things like this, and to go beyond just helping you learn your creative endeavors. And now we're trying to entertain and inspire you at the same time. So check that out. But amidst the pandemic, wanted to just take a second and check in. Hope that you and yours are safe and that you're following the guidelines that the CDC and all those folks are asking you to pay attention to, local governments. We have here in Seattle, we're obviously some of the first and hardest hit. And just want you to know that we're doing everything we can at Creative Live to bring you valuable information, entertainment, inspiration. And the guest today is going to deliver on that big time. And it's a fun backstory I can't wait to share with you. But in an effort to introduce him properly, my man Ben Moon is an adventure and lifestyle photographer. Probably that's my history as well. So you're going to see a lot of our connective tissue and all overlap. He turned director and filmmaker a number of years ago. I really got into his work starting in about 2015. He brings amazing stories to life, and he's been featured in I first started seeing his work in the Patagonia catalog more than a decade ago, and he's a renowned surfer, rock climber, adventurer, and storyteller, I guess is the best way. A little bit of backstory about Ben before I introduce him. He's a survivor of cancer, and there's a new book that he has recently released, which we're going to talk a little bit about his dog, Denali. It's the title of the book is Denali, A Man, a Dog, and the Friendship of a Lifetime. And without going into too much detail, Ben survived cancer, and then his dog Denali got cancer. And it's an amazing story of how each of them helped one another through this process. So we're going to cover a lot of ground, from photography and creativity to pursuing the dream that we all have with this one precious life, and how Ben does that like few others I've ever known or watched from a distance. We're going to trot out the book and try and entertain, inspire, and connect with you all. So feel free to ask questions. I'll do the best I can to answer them with Ben. But without further ado, please let me welcome to the show Mr. Ben Moon. Welcome, Ben. Thanks for being on, bud.
Thanks for having me. It's great to finally get to chat. We've run in parallel paths for a long time, so.
Super long time, and the Pacific Northwest. I know that, I'm born and raised in Seattle, and I know that you are in Oregon right now and have been for a long time. Was that your original, are you OG Oregon, or where's home?
I grew up in the Great Lakes in Michigan. I moved out here 21 years ago, so I've been here almost as long as I've been anywhere. So
it counts. It counts.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to share your story with the worldwide creative community in the best way that we can. And one of the things that I often like to start off with, part of my mission is to bring new people to light. But we've been in the same industry for a long time. Your work has made its laps around the world, not just your photography, but as I mentioned, the story, one of the films that you put out, I think you're the producer on the film with Denali. That was the precursor to the book. But let's go back before that and give me a little bit of a life background, starting off in Michigan and early childhood to moving out to Oregon, so we can orient the world and provide a couple of new hits for the people who are familiar with your work.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a small town in Michigan, and definitely um, had no aspirations of being a adventure photographer or any part of my life that is now. I was a more of a nerdy kid, the scrawny guy that got picked on the playground kind of thing. And in college, I started rowing crew, and interestingly enough, that was my first experience with the Pacific Northwest. We were we took a group of smaller guys like myself. I mean, I think I was maybe closer to 180, 6 foot when I was rowing crew, and we went out to nationals, and that year the University of Washington crew won the nationals, and we were in the four. And so here we are walking around a bunch of small guys with all these like giant 210-pound beasts, and it was so cool to see UW win and against all the Ivy League schools, and just there's something about, there was a big difference. I just saw something different amongst that crew, and then it was interesting, 15 years later to read Boys in the Boat and kind of hear the backstory of that crew, and start to, having lived out in the Northwest for now 20 plus years, to see why there was such a difference. And I really appreciate the Northwest. And I remember having an Outside Magazine Adventurer's Guide to the Pacific Northwest or something like that, being in Michigan, and just all I could think about is like the mountains are bigger, the ocean's bigger. I was climbing in a gym in college. That's when I kind of first got the spark. And as soon as I quit rowing, I dropped like 10 pounds of muscle in my legs and was able to climb a lot better because the crew just gives you giant legs and everything. And so I got that bug hard. And so the first time I climbed at Smith Rock, it just blew my mind. And visually that place is stunning. And I would say Smith and the Sierra East side really were the two places that sparked just a love for the visual, like the light and the light play and the seasons, and how I just remember a trip to Bishop. I had my first camera. I think I was working at the Nike climbing gym at the time, and my manager, it was his birthday, so he's like, you're not teaching your lesson tonight, because I was teaching climbing there. He's like, we're going to Bishop. And we drove all night and showed up, and it was in March, and so the Sierras were covered in snow. The White Mountains to the east were covered in snow, and the light was something I'd never seen. And obviously Galen Rowell and many others have been inspired by the range of light, but those were some of the first photographs I ever took that I was like, whoa, there's something here. But the first time I slapped one of those photos on my friend Brooke Sandahl from Metolius, his light table, he was like, please don't ever take a photo of Ironman Traverse again, because I've seen thousands of photos of that climb. But it's such a it was such a low hanging fruit, and it was like what sparked me. So
man, so early in no original connection to photography. It was actually the landscape and the light and what your friends were doing. How'd you get that first camera? What was your following of that passion?
I had like a Yashica T4. I was on a climbing trip. Actually, I was helping Tony Aniro, an old climbing legend, teach climbing classes at a climbing gym in Portland, and he invited me on a trip to the Needles in the Sierra, south of Yosemite, and Jim Thornburg was the photographer on that shoot. And I just remember watching him work, and I ended up, one of the photos that he took on that trip, he was published in Climbing Magazine full page, and it was just so cool to watch a photographer work. And I love Jim's work still, because he would always show how the line goes all the way down to the belayer. Like there's a way of perspective that like the vanishing point falls away to the belayer at the ground, and you see the entire route. And there's a beauty in like climbing in the line and the movement. And so I was really inspired by that. And it was about, I think around 2000 when a lot of the newspapers were starting to dump their film gear. And I got my first, I think it was a Nikon N90S, bought it from like Pro Photo in Portland, and was calling one of my friends who knew a little bit about photography and asking him what to get. And I don't know why I bought that. It was this weird intuition. And I mean, intuition's led me into some crazy places in life, but I bought that and went through a bunch of challenging experiences, divorce, and I was really young. I was 23 when I got married, and just photography kind of like helped draw me out of that experience. And living in the Metolius parking lot, in the back of a Subaru wagon, and then getting a camper van, and then I never planned to be a photographer. That was the thing. It just kind of happened.
That's the best. That's the best stuff in life, though. And you mentioned intuition. I want to go there for a second, but like virtually the same thing is true from every great photographer that I know. So few were like hook, line, and sinker early as a kid, and they grew up shooting the high school newspaper. And I don't really know anybody whose story is that sort of storybook. It's all a series of random events. For me, my grandfather died, and he was a camera nerd, and like the photo companies loved him because he bought all the new shit when it came out, and he passed away the week before my college graduation, and I suddenly was given all these cameras. I was like, oh, cool. Well, this is a sign from the universe. And your story, mine, and it seems like so many photographers have just ended up there, and that through either watching another photographer, as I did my grandfather, and as you did, some of the other greats that you mentioned, Jim and Galen Rowell. So like clearly you mentioned intuition, and you don't know why you went and bought that N90, but there was something in you that was talking to you. And so rather than why do we trust our intuition, or all of the sort of the tactical questions, what did you hear? What did you feel? Why, how did you know it was intuition? This is something I've been obsessed with, and I'm trying to hear from as many smart people as I can. Like, what did it sound like when you knew you had to buy a camera?
Intuition is a funny thing, because it's a lot of. Someone asked me the other day at a book reading, and it stuck with me. It's like, he's like, so how did a kid from a small town Michigan community that lived off the grid end up where you are today? Like just tell me how that happened. And I was like, well, it's a long series of a little light going off, or like seeing a door with just a little bit of light streaming through it, and that the hinges might be rusty, and it's not like the door's just like swinging open and there's big bay doors just like being like, oh.
Birds singing it. That doesn't happen, right?
No, you don't get this like invitation of like, the big choir chorus like singing you praises, telling you to come in. It's like you see some little glimmer of light, and you just kind of keep going towards it. And it's a combination of that, and seeing an opportunity and not saying no, and allowing, or just really just following that little gut, even though everything is fighting against you. Sometimes it doesn't make any sense, and it's just like it won't let go, and it takes effort. You have to go towards that, and just keep following that, and it's a series of little, just little sparks that kind of eventually catch fire. But it's not something you can just ignore and it goes away. It'll burn out. Like the opportunities pass all the time, and you just have to decide which ones to take. And I've learned, the hard way, that saying no is also one of the most powerful things we can possibly do, and so really it's like, it still happens every day. It was like when I made that film about my dog, Denali, it was a lot of my mentors and my most trusted peers were telling me, Ben, your dog passed, give it up. Like, it's okay. Like, because there was a long, long road to make that film. We tried a few different edits, and we tried a lot of things. And I was like, something is making me want to share this. There's something, and the only way I'm going to do it and tell my own story is if it's universal and there's something that other people can relate to. And fast forward to 4 or 5 years later, writing the book was a much deeper dive into that. And I never had an aspiration to be a writer either, but there's something about that story I knew could possibly help others. And I was like, if it can help one person, and even help one person go in and get checked out for colon cancer, like it'll be worth it, And so it's like, and that film was, the first day was 5,000 views, the second day was 1 million, and then outside it's like, I don't know, I have no idea how many views, 20 million or something at this point, but a lot of people have been touched by that story, and so it was just a affirmation that, intuition, when it's screaming, you better just listen,
Yeah, I like the characterization of it's like you're kind of like shucking and jiving a little bit. You hear something, you take a step towards it. It might not be the right thing, but you made, some forward progress, and also the maybe rusty, no choirs singing, no birds chirping. And there's this process of learning to trust yourself. Have you, if we look through the lens of intuition is learning to trust yourself, you cited the film as an example. Was that your real first and most powerful experience of learning to trust that voice, or had you had other hints of it earlier in life?
Well, even going with getting the camera, I mean, I had no idea where that would lead. It was just like, and it was back then. It was slide film, which was horribly unforgiving. You're a third of a stop off.
It's brutal.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I love Velvia. I mean, I still love just the feel of some of those old films. But I learned from library books, and I didn't have YouTube or a digital camera back or an iPhone to give me feedback, and so it was just a lot of expensive mistakes, and but yet that led to that weird little intuition made me send 2 sheets of slides to Patagonia, and I didn't know why. Nobody told me, oh, you shouldn't do that, they're too big. I just did it one day, and I sent 40 slides in, they held 4, and then the next summer they published 2, and it was and a few of my friends were like, oh, maybe you could do this as a career, and I just thought they were crazy at first, but it was that little spark. And there's so many, like Jimmy Chin and so many others have had that same thing where it's like, whoa, somebody paid me for a photo. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah, you're like looking around going like, when are they going to find out that I have this one camera, this one lens, and I only took like 32 pictures last year. 2 of them are in the Patagonia catalog.
Yeah. And yeah, so I think that was, everybody's like, how did you do that? I was like, I just did it. I looked it up, and at the time, and all the catalogs had the email address to send things, or the address to send in submissions to, and it was just, back then it was old school, sheet of slides, and my van was my little mobile like labs. I was just print labels and scan the slides I'd sent in, and but that was like one of my first indications, I think, career wise, that it's like, just kind of take one step to another. And there's another experience I went to Kauai. It was my first time in the Hawaiian Islands, and Patagonia was supposed to send me a bunch of samples, and I didn't have any, and so but that trip was this weird thing. I was like, visually that place was stunning to me, and especially with those films we were shooting back in the day. I knew I needed to make some content, so I ordered a bunch of clothes and ordered a water housing. I think I had an F100 at the time, and that camera died. I had to buy another one, and I was just going into debt, which at the time was heavy. The first couple of years of shooting are, you're not making any money, living off like $5,000-$10,000 a year, and so going in 10 grand in debt was a big deal. But something about that trip, like, I was like, I need to keep pushing. I need to create content, and if it fails, I'm done. And it, Patagonia used those photos for a decade, and it paid off. But so it's cool to like look back on some of those things, and writing the book was quite an experience, and like a lot of checks on like, wow, that happened. That was challenging, and that was one of the worst experiences of my life, but it brought this growth. And especially right now, I'm trying to remember that, because we're going through some wild times right now. But
yeah, for sure. I want to circle back and talk a little bit more about some of the things you just mentioned in the answer to that question. But since you brought it up, we are in crazy times right now. There was 8 years rather, where this was a live show. And then we took it off live because we wanted to, 3x the output and used to have a big in-studio audience and the big production. And then we opted for volume, and now here we are back. I'm downstairs in my television studio down here, and or well, I guess theater room, and you're on the in your van. I think you're building a house.
Yeah.
Was there here we are in strange times. Um, Anything come to mind that is that is struck you as particularly prescient right now? Like what has this pandemic brought forward for you?
Well, one thing I've learned over and over is, you know, positive change often comes at a cost, comes at a cost, and it also comes with some pain. And, this is already economically and health wise, and, the loss of life it's very obvious what this is caused, and it's just obviously starting in this country. But it's bringing out the best and the worst in people. And that's what challenging experiences do. And, it's going to be a ride, and, but it's already been really affirming to just feel and see, the first couple weeks were just, pretty crushing anxiety, and, just trying not to get on the, stuck on the news cycles. And, now I feel like there's hope, and people are bonding together, and, being innovative and resourceful. And, I found that the most challenging experiences require us to dig at the deepest within ourselves, and cause the most introspection and reflection. And I kind of liken it a little bit to the, pruning fruit trees or whatnot. It's like it feels awful to like cut these beautiful branches off a tree that's, producing fruit. But when you do, and you prune it back to what is very essential and we need the most, and here we are stuck at home, we can't go anywhere. What do we really need in life, And for me right now, I miss hugs. I mean, the only hugs I get right now are from my dog. And so it's, it's just so weird to like just, foot bump or. Bump with someone.
Yeah,
So,
far cry from the good old hug.
yeah.
So in that context, my understanding is that you're building a home there in Oregon, and the background that we're looking at is the wall inside your van where you're living while you're building that. Is that has the COVID changed that at all, or made you more grateful, scarier because of the economic investment that you're making, or what's the net toll of your current focus, which seems to be building the house?
Yeah. I mean, it's, well, the social isolation front. I mean, I definitely am being a kid who was like really shy growing up, and a pretty sensitive individual. I tended to have my recharge time, and I need that for creativity and for just human, and just for my own self, just keep my bandwidth health, just I know my own limits. But the irony is like, Northwest winters, I tend to go inward and like try to kind of take stock of everything. And we just hit spring, and we're just kind of like the days, we had a couple just gorgeous weeks, amazing surf. Um, and I was just kind of feeling like I was coming out of that winter and ready to
And
come out of the den. And then it felt like somebody was hanging out outside my den, just being like, "No, go back inside." And I was like, "No, I want some
what's
sunshine
going
right now."
on? Hey.
But yeah, the economical, obviously the economic hit is scary. It's scary. Yeah, it's like, you have 3 months of gigs canceled in a week. You're just like, oh well, that's, how do I be resourceful, and how do I make this happen? And but it's been interesting because I wrote most of the book sitting right where I'm sitting in the van. I've got it was a lot of that was just looking out at checking waves and writing, and then kind of been going this routine. I feel really fortunate to live across the street from the beach, and in this time right now, it's still that nothing's really changed about that. I still walk and just stare at the ocean because that always resets me. And I'm still making progress in the house. It's all framed and dried in, and the roof's on. And so I figured that, if I have to stop right now for a minute, it's okay. The van's comfortable, but I'll we're gonna get through this. And it's like the thing about this is, in our lifetimes, I mean, and unless you're over 75 and experienced World War II, like nobody in our we've never experienced anything like this globally ever. And so we're all in this together, and that can bring some beautiful things. It's going to be really challenging, but I think there's a lot of beauty to find in that too.
I love that perspective, and I think it's so different than a 9/11 or even the financial crisis of 2008. Like you said, there's been nothing like this since World War II or the pandemic in 1918, where it truly is global. Everybody's impacted. We all have to play a role in the solution, and show up for one another. I'm hopeful as hell that there's more good coming out of this than we can see at the present moment. Because, like you said, like people are dying and governments are struggling and the economy is tanking, and there's so many things that it's easy to throw darts at. But there's got to be this silver lining, and so I'm constantly looking for that. Is there some, for the folks you mentioned being scared? I think that's a really appropriate word. It just makes a ton of sense. I think a lot of people can identify with that, and that vulnerability that we all feel. Is there anything in particular that you're doing to stave that off? Anything besides looking at the ocean? Because that is obviously some good medicine. What else? Anything else you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, from what I know about you is like you're really interested in morning routines as well, and I think that's one thing that I've been really trying to be conscious of, especially, especially being having so much bad news or like heavy news like available to us right now, and I find that I try not to get on, the news or Twitter early on in the morning, and try not to digest too much of that because it'll just send you in a downspin. But instead, getting up and I like the Headspace app a lot, even if it's just a 10-minute meditation to like just take some deep breaths and clear my mind. It just really changes my entire day. And then I find if I can just get moving, because it's like the anxiety can be paralyzing. It can really it's real, and as someone who has battled with anxiety and depression in my past, it's like I'm very aware of when I feel it like creeping in. And so it's like I know I need that time to move my body, get exercise, get out for a run, go for a surf if I can. I mean, right now it's a little bit more challenging with, you know, um, just all the lockdowns and stuff, but it's like trying to get outside and do the best I can. And also just call a friend, like if you're thinking of somebody, check in with them, because they probably need to hear from you. So.
Oh, all super good advice. Want to give a shout out to a lot of folks coming in from all over the place. We got Kim and Victor and Hawken and Jorben and Frank and Jeff and Joan, and from all different corners of the globe. So a lot of people giving you a shout out, specifically commenting on your film Denali, and of course your most recent book. So in order to honor all those requests that are coming in from all over the world, I want to shift gears, say thanks for sharing what you're doing in these crazy times, but talk a little bit about some amazing creative successes that you've had, first with the film, and maybe you can chronicle a little bit about what that film's about, that short film that made the tours on all the festivals, and then segue from the film as basis for the book, and then to writing a book. I'm dying to hear what you have to say about it, having just written a book myself in the fall, and if it was anything like yours, it was so frickin' hard for me, just the discipline and the shifting gears and the working in a medium that I'm not familiar with. So, but start off by taking us back to, you mentioned earlier, doing the film about your dog Denali, and you surviving cancer, and him getting cancer. Can you walk us through it and why you made the film?
Yeah, as a lot of things in life, it didn't really start out as, I mean, it's a fairly simple film. There's not a lot of camera tricks, and we had a water housing, and that was about it. There's no drone photos. It's really simple footage, a lot of archival stuff. But basically, it started out, there was a commercial project, a really small little, just fun video that was going to be made, just kind of exploring. Initially, I was going to explore my um, love for the ocean and my love for climbing, and kind of that duality. And I love the energy of being in a city, but I also love being alone in nature. And so we were kind of thinking about exploring that. And my friend Skip Armstrong, who I'd met at one of the film festivals, and he'd just been so kind and I think I had photos up in that film festival. It was a smaller festival in Colorado, Five Point. And I just remember seeing some of his films and seeing how emotionally moving they were. And we got to work together on an Emancipator music video. So that was my first directorial thing. And so when this little project came up, Denali was in his last, I knew he was in his last days. He had stayed with me through a relationship, and when that came to a close, I told him, I was like, man, it's okay. It's okay to go. And and then while we were filming that little commercial project, Skip was like, Ben, I think we should shift this into like about you and your dog, because it just feels like, I see that bond between you, and I just want to, like, let's focus on that. And so he and my friend Paige, we just filmed for a week, and we had really great weather. It was like one of those high pressures we get here in the winter. And I had another little talk with Denali. I was like, hey man, I know I said it was cool to go, but can you just stick around for this month? And I mean, the crazy thing is he honored that almost to the hour. He just, yeah, he stuck around and he rallied, and he was tired, and I had to carry him during the filming. We were at Smith Rock and here on the Oregon coast where I live now. And, we made the most of it. And that footage, it was like the week before he passed. And so it was really special to have that. And, there's some failed edits, and we had a submission all ready for a festival, but it was too abstract. It wasn't personal enough. It just kind of rang hollow. And I realized, I had to take responsibility for that, because I wasn't ready to go there. And then I spent 3 months trying to edit the footage and couldn't do it. Another friend tried. He was too close to my story, couldn't do it. And Ben Knight, he had finished that film Damnation for Patagonia, and he had worked on that for 4 years. So he kept saying, I want to crack at it. I want to crack at it. But I was like, dude, you need a break. And so I kind of
and if it's take
no.
4 years, boy.
Yeah. Yeah. And so he got the hard drives, and like, it was also like a long process for him to crack into it too. But he had, when he kind of locked in, and I remember sitting, I was actually at South by with Jeff Johnson and my friend James Joyner, and we were doing a little book release at the Patagonia store during South by or whatever. And Ben finally sent me an edit. Like had been waiting for so long and had nothing. And he kind of works in isolation.
Weeks, months.
Months. Yeah.
Not
he works in isolation.
Here. It's
creative.
Like it takes time.
6 months probably, like, total, that he had it. And he's like, find a quiet place, put on some headphones. And I was in a Uber or something, and just like, I remember just like my phone was soaked within the first minute. I just was like bawling, and I was like, because I was expecting fully, like, I just felt like there's no way anyone could tell that story in a way that was going to convey my emotion and feeling for that dog, because he'd been with me from age 24 to 39. It was a very formative part of, growing up and being, just like coming into my creative self, and also growing up and being a human being, and when I saw that first cut, I was like, he unlocked something. And showing it to Jeff and James later, they were just both fully in tears. I was like, whoa, there's something here that touched a nerve. And so it was really special to have that. And then, like I said before, the first day it came out was just my friend sharing it, and then I woke up the next day to my phone exploding from news outlets from all over the world, and even Oprah shared it later. And it's been a wild ride, I guess. And just really what I've realized with that is, like, when you can be vulnerable, when you can share the hard stuff, when you can find a way to make your work relatable, it will reach people. And it wasn't like some major news outlet that broke it. It was like a bunch of smaller little blogs. It was just people sharing it amongst themselves. So
yeah, I remember I got it that first morning as well, as a part of us being in the same community, and it brought me back to some mutual friends that we had that crossing paths in Central Oregon. There as an action sports photographer, I was down at Bachelor and Bend and Smith and all those places a lot for a lot of commercial jobs, and was vaguely familiar with your work then. That just like brought it all back. And it's like that in the particular lies the universal, right? You told a very personal story about your own experience with cancer, and then flipping the script through Denali's eyes. What, you put that film out there, you said a couple of times you had a few edits. Is there something that changed in you that made it possible for you to go there? Or was it having another set of eyes and that other editor? Like where did the possibility and the willingness to be vulnerable, where did that come from?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think it was just I suddenly just realized that I had to go there. Like it needed to, I couldn't hold back anymore. I don't honestly remember that distinct moment, but I just remember telling my friend Katie Klingsborn, she's the one who like did the interview to like kind of get all the information for Ben to write the narration for it. And I just remember telling him and Katie both, I was like, my story is wide open. Just go wherever you need to. And, the first time, some of the, more humorous moments in the film are like some of the most personal at the same time too. And I learned that later on too, that, we kind of like jokingly shared about having a colostomy bag in the film, with a joke about, having to pick up my dog's poop and put it in plastic bags or whatever, which is like a really genius way of telling that story. But I'd never really shared that with the greater public. And I remember sharing a post on Instagram a couple of years later. I had lost a few friends, close friends, to colon cancer. And I think now I've lost a total of 5 friends to colon cancer, and, 3 or 4 of them have been under the age of 40. And it's just like, doctors consider that over 50 disease. And I was just frankly just kind of fed up. And I was like, I need to share something publicly about this. And I posted a shot of me, with my shirt off that showed that I was had a bag, and just kind of more of a PSA being like, hey, listen, like if you have any of these symptoms, don't take no for an answer. Go to your doctor. You need to get checked out. And I was terrified to share that, almost as terrified as the film. And it by far, like exponentially, was the most engaged photo I've ever shared, like still to this day. And the amount of feedback I got from that, and realizing that it's okay to be vulnerable. Like it's really important to share things that are, that you feel you need to share. And that really helped me finish the book too. I mean, it was like remembering all the friends I had lost to that disease, and like realizing how much my dog had helped me through those experiences. Like it made it a lot easier to, tackle something that was, quite frankly, one of the most daunting experiences. Like, writing is, you don't get all the other tricks, you don't get
Yeah.
the pretty photos. You got to just say it.
Yeah, there's no hand waving, right? You got to like
Yeah.
put words on paper, because you're not going to be there to walk people through it, and you can't, wave a pretty picture in front of someone's face. Let's pull on that thread a little bit. So first of all, thanks again for sharing I think that vulnerability there is just such a powerful message, that the best stuff in life is the stuff that is the scariest, and it's also the stuff that brings us together and helps connect us in a way that we realize that we're all human. I think we live in this world where we can put one image up on a bulletin board, or a conceptual digital bulletin board with our social feeds, and then we're feeling and experiencing something entirely different. And when you flip that script, as you did with that post, it's just a great testament and a reminder that we are all human. Keep going on that thread about moving into the book. I don't know how the story of how that came to be relative from the short film. The film, I want to direct people to take a peek at it when we finish with the broadcast here. I think it's like 7.5 minutes long. Is that right? Something like that.
Yeah, 7-8 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the version that's on Vimeo is beautiful, and it's where I first saw it. I think when you posted it there, however many 5 or 6 years ago now.
Yeah.
So I direct people to go check it out. If you type in Denali Ben Moon Vimeo, it'll come up for sure. But what was the shifting gears from doing that short film that made its way around the world, as you said, to translating it into a book?
There was a distinct moment. It's ironic. Like a couple of the moments I remember most about sharing that film were, on my back porch in Portland when I was living there. I remember waking up to my phone exploding there with all the news outlets calling. But I also remember after all that was sort of dying down, I was a little bit at a loss of where to go next, because there'd been all this attention suddenly on my story, and I it was frankly, being, a really sensitive individual, like it was overwhelming to have, tens of thousands of messages coming in, everybody sharing their stories, and a lot of, the sharks were circling, so to speak, like people wanted to tap into that story and cash in on it, and I just didn't know what to do. And I talked to my friend Shannon Etheridge. She's a producer I work with a lot now, and she worked with Jimmy Chin and over the years a lot, and a lot of my friends. And she said, Ben, before you like offer to tell your story in any other way, I highly suggest you put it down on paper yourself. Like just and I just, that stuck with me. And but I had no idea really where to go with that. And the only person I knew in the outdoor space who was a published author, in any greater realm, was John Krakauer. We'd met at a,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe, I mean, I remember he used to just like digesting all his books, The Into Thin Air and Into the Wild, and just, back in the day, like those, when I was getting into climbing, those were huge influences on me. And he was kind enough to, chat with me for an hour, and just like kind of said, hey, if you have any inkling of writing, now's a good time. And he sent me to his editor, who was also the editor of Outside and Men's Journal for a long time, Mark Bryant. And Mark took me under his wing and helped me find his, the representation, and helped me find my voice. And I hired him to help me walk through the proposal process. And Tommy Caldwell had the same book agent, and he like helped, showed me what he had done for his proposal for the Dawn Wall book, Push. And really those, John and Mark both just helped me immensely. And then obviously, once the proposal was done, which took about a year and a half, like to finish that, we had to do all the pitch calls and everything. And I remember talking to my editor that I have now, Patrick Nolan from Penguin, and he was really interested in my story. A lot of people wanted me to spin it into another cute dog book, they wanted it in Denali's voice. And I was just like, I had no desire to write that's been done well,
Yeah, it's a risky proposition to speak
yeah.
from.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, Art of Racing in the Rain, or like Marley and Me. There's been a lot of like cute books like that, but they're novels, it's not like a real book. And I was like, and the only way I want to do this, if I can get real with my story and talk about things that are really important to me. And I'm so grateful for that. Patrick he wanted the real stuff, and so that, book writing is a team, there's so many people involved. And my friend Alexis, who I'd done a story on about her dog and battling mental illness and stuff, like she ended up being kind of my interim editor. And it was great to have someone that I could kind of be in the trenches with and help get through the tough sections, and have someone to bounce ideas off of, that I was just like, is this too personal? Is this going too far? Like, how do I get through this? And so it was a 4-year journey to get the book, done. And so it wasn't like, it's a brief, I think the audiobook, when I read it, took about 7 hours. So it's not like a massive book, but the amount of time it took to put that all together was, it was omnipresent in my mind for 4 years. So it feels really cathartic to finally have it out in the world.
Well, it's a stunning book. And again, for anyone who has not had it, I've already steered you to the film. But, Denali, A Man, a Dog, and The Friendship of a Lifetime, obviously available anywhere books are sold, Amazon, and, being in the world that we're in right now, getting that Kindle delivered right to your electronic doorstep, if you will, is that's always an option. Just to retrace a step here, it sounds, you mentioned several people, that writing a book is a team sport, and I think that about every aspect of my career, and how important community has been. But in your words, what role has mentorship played in your ability? And how did you seek those mentors, and do you have any advice for how others might seek them for themselves?
I, I what I've found is that well, there's a Conrad Anker said once, I mean, you don't find your mentors, they find you. And really one of the first mentors I had, I mean, I had a few, I mean, my friend Brooke at Patagonia or at Metolius, where when I was working there and living in the parking lot, he kind of saw something in me, but also it was, Jane at Patagonia. I mean,
Jane
she's
Stewart.
Jane Sievert, man. She's responsible for so many people's careers, just seeing
Yeah.
something in the rough edges of what I was doing, and just encouraging that and just gently encouraging that. And she's still one of my dearest friends. And I mean, she was the photo editor for 30 plus years at Patagonia.
Yeah, I haven't
And
talked in a while. The next time you see her, please say hi.
will
She's an
do.
amazing spirit, man.
Yeah, she's holed up in Northern California and on her property. She's got a great scene going on there. But yeah, and and I also think back to even climbing. Speaking of Conrad, I was on a trip. I was just working in a gear shop in Michigan, this little outdoor store near the beach, called Earth's Edge, where I first kind of saw. I caught my first waves in that zone, and but I remember I was on a dealer camp trip to the Red River Gorge, and Conrad was there, and I was just losing my mind because he was one of my heroes, and I had photo posters of him up in my little apartment, and he just was really encouraging and helped me get push my limits in climbing, and then later, a couple years later, my friend Sonny Trotter, who's been a climber for Patagonia for a long time, I met him when he was like 19 years old, and I was literally in the Smith Rock campground reading a How to Shoot Climbing Photos book by Jeff Ackey. Um, and so we were kind of just both Croms, just figuring it out. And I had my camera and I was just trying to learn how to use it. And but I was on a climb during that trip, and I was breaking it. I was like my first 513 or something, and I was on it and on top rope. And I just remember him offering one little word of encouragement, and I was going through like all the challenging times back then, and with just life changes, and it was having that little gentle nudge, and like going back to Jane, like just her being like, hey, like I really love that photo you sent, or there's little kind words that you don't realize how much of a ripple effect those are going to have on someone's life. And so um, I try to remember that every time someone writes or ask a question, just to take a little bit of time. Just 5 minutes can really help someone get through something. And so, um, yeah, that's
Mentorship, man. It's like it comes in so many forms, and a lot of times it takes us some time to realize that we're being mentored, or that we're in a position to offer that word that you mentioned. And it's like, if we could just raise the awareness of that is the thing that it's squashed many a career, and it's kept so many people to continue whatever journey they're on, and give them a little bit of energy and encouragement to keep moving forward. It's clear that mentorship played, you just in that 5 minutes talked about climbing and photography and writing the book and submitting photos. And is there a way that you have found that you can be particularly effective, you personally, as a mentor to others? I mean, aside from writing a book and doing, creating art, your films and whatnot, anything for people who are like unlikely mentors themselves? What advice would you give?
um, I think in looking at to the generations that are still inspiring me. I'm on the Sony team, and a lot they gather a lot of people together at these events every year, and it's been interesting to look up to the older, you know, uh, kind of photo legends, like David Burnett and guys like that. And one thing that's just like, um, especially David, he's just, the guy was shooting photos of Bob Marley back in the 70s, and, some of these iconic like press photos. And he's like a little kid. He's so curious. And I think what he just takes the time to listen and chat and and curiosity and the ability to listen, I feel like, and not just having that ego barrier that it's so easy to put up, or just be like, oh, I don't want to like, I've moved past that phase in my life. I don't want to like remember that. It's important to just, we're all learning, or, if you stop growing and you think you've made it, like the fall is going to be precipitous, like it's the best thing to do is to constantly reinvent. And, you and I have gone through it in our careers. Like we've seen it shift from, film to digital to motion to social media. Like, and a lot of people are like, I don't want to change. And they just drop off. You need to figure out ways of pushing yourself and reinventing yourself, and remember that, someone asking you a question, like being kind and answering and listening to them is going to change their lives and could really make a difference. And they could end up being your mentor someday. So don't blow them off,
That's right. You never know, right? The tide will turn. And I think that's so true. There's just the kindness. I want to underscore that point. That's something that rings really, really true for me. Even if you don't have time to help someone, being kind and giving them a very simple, kind word, like that one word that you got from somebody on a climbing wall at your first 513, like, whether that person knows it or not, like that was clearly super impactful. It would probably be an understatement to say another thing that has had a huge impact in your life is surviving cancer. I'm wondering if you can, walk us through some of the your experience there and how it changed and maybe provided guidance or hurdles or what effect it had on you.
I think it was both, physically and emotionally and creatively. I mean, it was all those things. I realized, I was in my late 20s, climbing hard and just focusing on, for all intents and purposes, pretty selfish pursuits. It's just, my career was just getting going. I was enjoying life on the road. And, suddenly having that physical ability stripped away, where you didn't know if you're going to, make it through the week, or, if this disease was going to take me. It was a real shift to have that happen. And then but it made me realize, when you're stripped of all your physical abilities, what really matters is, the people we care about, those that we're connected to, those you love, and a little word or just even a kind thought can make all the difference. And in my work, it was like I was more enamored with, the athletic accomplishments and more, bigger climbs, higher grades, bigger waves, all those things I just wanted to like keep pushing myself visually, kind of the Red Bull mindset, whatever. But it really made me realize when I couldn't, my work for that year, because I was on chemo and radiation, I just had no creative mojo at all. I was just flattened. It started shifting me into wanting to shoot other things, and really interested me in like human emotion and connection and storytelling. And I mean, that impact like has been profound. It didn't happen immediately. It shifted my work from being the fly on the wall to being okay with shooting portraiture, and like, I have a project where I just kind of do this up close black and white portraits with people with the same lens, similar quality of light. And I realized that there could be just as much challenge in shooting that photo as there would be in, being up on El Cap or, out in huge waves, shooting, with an athlete. I realized that vulnerability and that moment of connection was just super profound. So yeah, it had ramifications on my entire life. And it's like, I realized, I feel like I'm trying to remember that in this time too. It's like that was the most single-handedly one of the most challenging experiences of my life, but yet it had the most positive change come from it. And, I'm just glad I'm still here and trying to appreciate every day. So.
Well, we've got Anita and Kim, and there's not a dry eye in the comments right now. Both with your story that you're sharing right now, and some folks have snuck off and watched the Denali film, and Christine, Scott, Kim, Nano, just giving you a shout out from all over the world. Liz says she appreciates us and sharing the story, Ben. I think it's just the thing you said there, like you're grateful that you're here, and there's something that's so profound. How do we live in it's in these moments where we're tested, these huge moments, whether it's COVID and the sort of the huge negative fallout, not just the economic, but lives are literally being lost. And for you, for example, with battling cancer and living with your dog who also passed from cancer, um, what it's obvious in those moments that we are able to like take stock, and I'm wondering though, are there aspects or the things that we should be doing or can be paying attention to that we don't require these sledgehammers that some come crashing through our worlds? Do you have any advice for how to have that attitude or that lens on life on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot this winter before all this these new challenges came about. Just writing a book at the same time I was building my first home was two were two very giant projects to take. They both seemed impossible. And in learning how to take those one day at a time. But in the midst of all that overwhelm and just like things were going well, I had a book deal. I was building a house. Like those are great things, like, and like really life goals. But I was feeling just crushed by the anxiety and overwhelm of like, can I do this? Like the doubts and the fears. And the one thing that really sustained me through that is just the focus on, just focusing on what I could control, which is being grateful for what I had, what I had in each moment. And, it's, there's ways of doing that, whether it's just journaling or meditation or just, taking a few deep breaths and thinking about the people you appreciate that day or those that have done something for you or a moment in that day that one positive moment in your day. If you can just focus on that feeling. Somebody told me, or somebody quoted, trying to think of who it was, maybe Pete McBride or somebody said in one of his posts recently that was like, worry is praying for the wrong things to happen. Like you don't want to focus on the negative. You want to try to focus on what you can control and the people you can be kind to and people you can love. And so,
Man, well, what's next? How much you got left on the house there?
all the inside.
All the inside, right?
Yeah, that's all the stuff you don't see, all the stuff you cover up. So, but yeah, I built the place, I've lived in a lot of smaller houses and I built it as a place to kind of be a creative hub. I have a studio and a place to share. And, there's a lot of people traveling through this area. It's a really popular beach destination. And I just wanted it to be a place I could give back and a place I could, form community and like, have a lot of my friends write music and like to have them be able to come here and, write an album or like write a book or whatever. I just want to provide that space for people to come and just foster creativity and community. And it's really special to already see that happening, even just like it's a place where people just stop by, and a lot of people that I know from the North Shore have compared it to Hawaii, how it's like a smaller, there's just like a smaller community here. So people feel okay just popping in. Whereas when I was in the city, you always want to meet at a show or, go out for drinks or whatever. And it's just like, it kind of becomes like less of a intimate moment. Whereas like, being able to have people come out here and go for a wander and see the beauty that is this area, like the conversations, like the depth of them is just, it's really special. So,
amazing to be able to provide that. So next is presumably finishing the house. Is there a next? Like do you have something creative beyond the drywall and the furnishings that I know that go into a house? Yeah.
it's like I'm trying to really lean into the beauty of like not knowing what's next. I've been working a lot with this electric vehicle company called Rivian that is kind of launching this. This went, more into the public eye this past year with a lot of things, but they're a really incredible company to work with. They're wanting to create positive change and do a lot of storytelling, and so they brought me on as a creative and as an ambassador this past year. And so there's a lot of kind of fun stuff in the works with them and that I'm really excited about. Jeff Johnson, the writer and star of 180 South, and now director and photographer. He used to be the staff photographer for Patagonia, lived on the North Shore, and he directed a little piece for them about my story. I think that comes out really soon. And so there's just a lot of, I don't know. I love having a little bit of a moment to take a breath. Obviously this is, I'm trying to appreciate that right now in these times, that this quiet time is really valuable. And, so I'm excited for what's next. I just want to tell, people always ask me like, what's your business plan? Well, how do you get to where you are? It's like, I just want to work with people that inspire me, people that lift me up and tell great stories. It's like, I don't always know what those are. It's always just, you kind of got to, something lights you up, you go towards it. So
I think that's amazing advice. And there's some concept out there that maybe culturally we've planted the seed, or that you have some master plan, and it's only when you have the master plan that you start sort of walking to it. And I don't know anyone who's really had that plan, or if they have had a plan, that plan hasn't changed a lot. But all of it started with just walking in that direction, that whether the path you said, I talk about it in creative calling as this calling, like you don't know what it is, but you just know which direction it's coming from, and if you start walking that direction. I also really appreciate the finding a little solace in this crazy world moment where what is amidst so much tragedy, what is the upside of simplification, of maybe not necessarily isolation. I'm trying to invoke the concept of, physical distance, but social connection. Like there's so many ways to think about the upside in a world where we're constantly being bombarded with the downside. So thank you for saying that and for sharing. Again, just a reminder, we've got people listening from all over the world, shouting out Dana and Sean and Kim, Liz, just saying thank you so much for sharing your story. I just have one last question, and it's a simple one, but I'm hoping to learn a little bit more about how you view your past. Would you change anything? You've shared a bunch of like both gut-wrenching and heartwarming stories. Are you saddled with any regrets, or what advice would you have for looking at your past and how it relates to your future?
if I could tell anything to my younger self, I'd just be like, don't worry so much about what everybody else thinks. Like, try to just don't sweat the small stuff and look at the big picture. It's so easy to get caught up in the why me challenge, of challenges, and just remember that just to focus on the good and the things you can control. My personality is, that's a whole nother topic, but it's like, I'm definitely an inner thinker. I like think about things endlessly. And, when someone's like, how in the world did you just come up with this idea or this, make this happen? It's like, well, I think about stuff a lot inside, and I can overthink things. But one thing I have to remind myself is that, a master plan is open for interpretation. My best photographs, my best films have always been when things take a twist. You're shooting one direction, you turn around and the light is so much better behind you, or you just listen to the person you're working with and they're like, what about this idea? And so I like try to make a plan, but then also leave, like, I like to have an outline and then leave room for that, like those moments where you can take those little side roads, those side paths, those little side trips that really lead you to the beauty in life. And so I think it's good to remember that, take the leap, but know that it's not going to always be clear right away, and to just trust that those little voices and those little sparks, like they'll lead somewhere good. And so don't overplan. I definitely have that, those tendencies, and it's so easy to want to know what's going to happen. But moments like this in our lives, we just remember that any illusion of control we have is just that, it's an illusion. So
Yeah, I don't know a lot of people that were planning on a global pandemic.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you even conceptualize that, when you're in all of the doomsday planning or for your business, or if you're a creator entrepreneur, you can solve for so many things. And I don't know a bunch of people that had a big contingency plan for something. So, we are, vulnerable. Life is fragile. But thank you so much for sharing your story. And in particular, because I guess of its recency, just came out a handful of weeks ago, your new book, Denali, A Man, a Dog, and Friendship of a Lifetime. What's the best place for people to follow you on the internet? I'm guessing you're at Ben Moon, but where else would you steer people, Ben?
Yeah, on Instagram, I'm at Ben_Moon, Twitter, Ben Moon. Yeah, and my website's benmoon.com, and feel free to hit me up. And
You're
the
gonna have a
book.
whole bunch of people wanting to stay at your pad. You're gonna
uh,
have just a commune out there in your pad in Oregon pretty soon here.
yeah, love it. So yeah, come say hi. Yeah, I just thank you so much, Chase. It's great to have this conversation, and thanks for going to the deeper places that matter. So that's where.
Man, appreciate you and your work. And again, we've been in the same circle for a long time. I got a lot of respect for you and what you've done. And thanks for sharing that with a lot of people on the internet. I know that can be vulnerable, but you've just added a lot of value, given us all a lot to think about. And my heart and my gratitude is 11 out of a 10. And thanks so much for being on the show, man. I really, really genuinely appreciate it. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Chase. Likewise. Thanks for sharing these stories that matter these times. So appreciate it.
Happy to do it, bud. Thanks again. And for those folks at home, thanks again for tuning in. Please, give Ben a shout out. Go check out his film, Denali, and of course, pick up the book. Both are stunners. The film will only take 7 minutes. I'll maybe see if I can get permission from Ben to share that on the Creative Live TV, which is, if you're just tuning in now at creativelive.com/TV, we're bringing live broadcasts from people in our community all over the world. I'm sitting down here in my basement. Ben is in his van on the Oregon coast, and we've got musical performances, we've got spoken word poetry, we've got cooking stuff all coming along to try and not just teach you as we do at Creative Live, but also to inspire and entertain you with what's going on in this crazy COVID era. So signing off, thanks so much for being a part of the show. Thanks again, Ben, and we will see you again on the next show.